One of my personal favourite comedies from the early 2000s is the movie Dodgeball starring Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn. Weirdly, I actually saw this movie for the first time on a plane shortly after it came out. It was one of those in-flight movies, and ever since then, I've been a fan of it. It's one of those films that has the kind of audacious humour that is right up my alley. It's the type of film they just don't make anymore. A film that is genuinely funny, but in a way that's sometimes hard to explain why. However, despite how funny the movie is, and despite how much I enjoy it, something about this movie never sat right with me. There was always something about it that, even when I first watched it, just felt a bit forced to me, and that is the movie's ending. Not just the ending, but the entire final act of the movie in general. When you watch this movie from start to finish, it gets to a point where if you're really paying attention, certain things about it feel shoehorned in, and it feels as if something from the movie is missing. There's also a couple of jokes in the final act that are straight up meta, which to me never felt consistent with the rest of the movie. One thing that also confused me over the years, but was something I kind of just assumed was satire, was the title, A True Underdog Story. I legit thought as a kid that this was based on a true story. But as I got older, and realised that there was no way that that could possibly be the case, it made me wonder, what exactly was the joke behind the title, and what exactly were they satirising? So to sum up the movie's plot, White Goodman, the hilarious egomaniacal entrepreneur and fitness fanatic, has established his own gym, that of course satirises the fitness industry. He runs his business by putting down his competition and shaming people into wanting to better themselves, and even uses his own history of obesity and food addiction as a selling point. At the same time, his local competitor, Peter LaFleur, played by Vince Vaughn, is the complete opposite. He runs a humble, cheap and worn-out gym across the street, and unlike White, LaFleur has no entrepreneurial drive whatsoever, and is perfectly content with his lazy, simple existence. There are several jokes about this early in the film, and the contrast between them makes for some incredible comedy. Basically what kicks off the plot is that due to LaFleur's lazy attitude and lack of ambition, refusing to call in his debts and allowing his business to go under, he ends up in serious debt. Meanwhile, White buys out his mortgage and plans to demolish LaFleur's gym to make way for a new parking area for his customers. Peter and his average group of buddies from the gym decide that in order to pay off the debt and save the gym, they will need to raise the money. To do this, they enter into a dodgeball tournament where, conveniently, the prize for winning is the exact amount of money that they need to pay off the debt. Long story short, they enter the tournament and White himself assembles a team of the world's best dodgeball players in an attempt to win the tournament himself, to assure that he gets what he wants in the end. When the competition heats up, he attempts to bribe LaFleur into signing away his gym, to which LaFleur then uses the bribe to bet on his own team for the win. The game goes ahead, the good guy wins, bad guy loses, yada yada yada, you know the script. That's basically a summary of the film's plot. A little bit more to it than that, but you get it. So what's the problem? Well, as far as I'm concerned, the ending not only doesn't make sense, but feels completely out of place and inconsistent with the tone of the rest of the movie. And you can tell very easily that there were some major last-minute rewrites. So Average Joe's is kicking ass in the competition, along with their hilariously old-school, politically incorrect, no-nonsense coach, played by Rip Torn, and are full of confidence. Then all of a sudden, in a blink-and-you'd-miss-it scene, a Luck of the Irish sign falls on Rip Torn's character and kills him. This comes completely out of nowhere, and it changes the tone of the movie, and makes the entire thing feel so different. All of a sudden, right after the coach dies, all hope seems lost, and Average Joes, who had dominated up until that point, at least in terms of the final result of each game, are all of a sudden 50-1 underdogs with little to no chance of winning. This leads to a strangely out of character and unusually cliché scene where LaFleur all of a sudden gives up hope and resigns himself to a loss, leading to the bribe scene. Now, one problem I have with the bribe scene is that it doesn't really make much sense. White is depicted all the way through the movie as an absolute egomaniac, with the kind of confidence only a man who has never lost a thing would have. His team are the best in the world, so why does he need to buy the loser LaFleur off exactly? And more to the point, buying him off changes nothing from the perspective of the Dodgeball game. LaFleur gets 100 grand, White gets a new parking lot, but the game still goes ahead if LaFleur wants it to. What exactly does White gain from this? And why does he feel the need to buy Peter off in the first place? The reason why this doesn't seem to make sense is because it doesn't. Because the scene is the result of a last-minute rewrite. You see, the original ending to Dodgeball, and the ending that was supposed to be the movie's ultimate twist, was this. White was supposed to win the game. That was the original ending to Dodgeball. The whole bribe subplot and the cliché, brooding quitter who comes back to save the day last minute scene, for those of you who don't know, was actually added to the movie out of spite. Spite for the test audiences who reacted poorly to the movie's original, unexpected, and absolutely audaciously hilarious ending. In the theatrical ending, you get a couple of funny yet nonsensical meta-type jokes, such as the stupid guy making out with the ugly chick in a weird way, Kate supposedly being revealed as a lesbian, which pokes fun at a running joke earlier in the movie about her throwing so hard that she must be a lesbian, which got dropped midway through the movie, and weirdly felt shoehorned in at the end. And you know that this wasn't supposed to be in the movie because she still ends up with LaFleur anyway. And to top it all off, LaFleur's winnings from the bet he made being immediately wheeled out onto the dodgeball court inside of a massive pirate-style treasure chest labelled Deus Ex Machina on the side. This is actually pretty hilarious when you consider what the filmmakers were actually trying to say with it. You also get a post-credit scene where White is sitting in his house, back to being morbidly obese, and he actually breaks the fourth wall. He comments on how American moviegoers and the movie industry can't handle any sort of complexity or ambiguity, and are just content with the same old safe, cliché garbage in movies. Again, this is something that, while funny, never made that much sense to me as a kid. When you consider what the original ending of the movie was supposed to be, it actually makes so much more sense, and you can tell in retrospect that it was the ending they were actually setting up from the beginning. I mentioned earlier that the title of the movie is Dodgeball, a True Underdog Story, despite not being based on a true story. This is actually because that's not what the title was originally implying. The True Underdog Story part of the title is supposed to highlight the realities of underdogs, and what would really happen to them if they suddenly became overly ambitious. Peter LaFleur is a loser, not only because he doesn't have the money or the resources that White Goodman has, but because he is lazy, careless, and downright irresponsible. The movie implies several times early on that the reason LaFleur is in the predicament he's in is due to his own stupidity and his own lack of professionalism. You might recall early in the movie that White appears to have a personal vendetta against LaFleur. This is partially because LaFleur took several jokes way too far and pissed White off a few times, doing things such as messing around with his female instructors and sending him a male stripper, thinking it would be funny when instead it just pissed White off. White hates LaFleur because LaFleur brought it on himself, and when it came to doing battle, LaFleur was far too lazy and stupid to handle his business. The dodgeball tournament was basically a lifeline and a stroke of luck. Speaking of luck, the only reason LaFleur and his team have any success at all is mostly due to blind luck. They win the regional qualifying match by disqualification due to a failed drug test by one member of the other team. They win most of their games due to the other teams being one-note joke characters, each with their own team's gimmick. And the amount of loopholes and rule bending that has to be done to even allow them to play against White's team in the final is again mostly based on luck, and certain characters being in the right place at the right time. It requires a major suspension of disbelief, and to be honest, it's just quite unrealistic. With White's team winning the final game in the end, this would have been a crazy, yet audacious way to end the movie, and more to the point, it would have been more realistic, made more sense, and it would have fit perfectly with the tone of the rest of the movie. It would have removed the overwhelming need for suspension of disbelief, and it would have done its bit to remove any cliches from the movie. Take for example the Lance Armstrong scene. It's funny, but it comes out of nowhere and it just makes no sense. That would never happen in a million years. Or the blindfolding scene during the sudden death part of the game, which reminded me of Luke blowing up the Death Star without his targeting computer, which made sense in Star Wars, where Luke has supernatural abilities. But it doesn't make sense here. LaFleur is blind. He can't see. He would never win that unless he could at very least see. The original ending, while it might have pissed some people off, over time, in my personal opinion, the movie would have stood out even more, and it would have been remembered as a masterpiece that was way ahead of its time, later gaining a much bigger following than it currently has. Thankfully, they did add part of the original ending as an alternate ending feature in the DVD of the movie, so that is something, and it gives you a chance to see what the filmmakers originally had in concept. So in short, while I do still like Dodgeball, and I think the movie's final theatrical ending is pretty funny, I just think it's a bit of a shame that the original wasn't implemented, because it would have made the movie so much more funny in my personal opinion. Plus it would have allowed them to cut out some of the stupid, shoehorned in jokes such as the lesbian thing, or the forced drama, or the Deus Ex Machina, and all the ridiculous stuff that just made no sense. Thanks for watching, guys. I really enjoyed talking about Dodgeball because it's one of my personal favourite comedy movies. It's been a while since I did a movie review like this, and it's not something that I've really had much of an urge to do lately. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and God bless.